In the last video, we discussed material mix variance. In this video, we are going to discuss material yield variance. So first, let's understand what do we mean by the term yield. Yield means nothing but your output. So material yield variance tells us how effectively we are converting the input into output. Or to put it very simple, how effectively we are converting the raw material into finished goods. What is raw material input? What is finished goods output? So how effectively this input, which is nothing but your raw material, is converted into output, which is nothing but your finished goods. And material yield variance is the only output variance, whereas all the other variances like material price, material quantity, all these are input variance. But material yield variance is the only output variance. Now let's take the same numerical example to understand material yield variance. So on the left hand side, we have the standard data. On the right hand side, we have the actual data. The standard data is in order to produce 1 unit of output. Output is nothing but finished goods. In order to produce 1 unit of output, we are planning to use two types of raw material. One is raw material A and the other one is raw material B. We are planning to use 6 kg of raw material A and 4 kg of raw material B to produce 1 unit of output. So the total raw material requirement is 10 kg, which means by using 10 kg of raw material, we are planning to produce 1 unit of finished goods. We are planning to pay rupees 10 per kg for raw material A and 12 per kg for raw material B. And actually, our actual production is we actually produced 100 units of finished goods for which we used 750 kg of raw material A and 350 kg of raw material B. And the actual price paid for purchasing raw material A is rupees 11 per kg, and the actual price paid for purchasing raw material B is rupees 13 per kg. So sorry, actually we used 1100 kg of raw material to produce 100 units of finished goods. Now for this data, let's see how to calculate material yield variance. The formula for calculating material yield variance is equal to actual yield minus standard yield for actual input multiplied by standard cost per unit of finished goods. So please listen carefully. Outside the bracket, we have standard cost per unit of finished goods and not raw material. Why? Because as we already discussed, material yield variance is an output variance. Right? What is output? Finished goods. So outside the bracket, it should be standard cost per unit of finished goods and not the standard cost of raw material. Right? So now let's discuss each of these components in detail. So material yield variance is equal to actual yield. Actual yield is nothing but the actual units of output that you produce. In this question, what is the actual output that we produced? Actual number of finished goods produced by the company is 100 units. So that becomes the actual yield. So actual yield is 100 units. This is the actual output produced by the company. Now, actual yield minus standard yield for actual input. Now let's understand what is the standard yield for actual input and let's see how to calculate it. So here in my standard, I expected to use 10 kg of raw material to produce 1 unit of finished goods, right? So this 10 kg is nothing but my input. This 1 unit of finished goods is nothing but my output. So let me write it over here. Raw material or input is 10 kg. And I plan to produce 1 unit of finished goods by making use of 10 kg of raw material. So this finished goods is nothing but my output. So this is my standard. By making use of 10 kg of raw material, I planned to produce 1 unit of finished goods, right? What is the actual amount of raw material used by me? I actually used 1100 kg of raw material, right? I actually used 1100 kg of raw material, or my input is 1100 kg. By making use of this 1100 kg of raw material, how many units of finished goods I could have produced? If by making use of 10 kg of raw material, if I can produce 1 unit of finished goods, then by making 1100 kg of raw material, how many units of finished goods I could have produced? Just cross multiply and see you could have produced, or we could have produced 110 units of finished goods by making use of 1100 kg of raw material. So this is nothing but my standard yield for actual input. What is my actual input? 1100 kg. For this 1100 kg, how many units of finished goods I could have produced? I could have produced 110 units of finished goods, right? So this is the standard yield for actual input. But did I actually produce 110 units of finished goods? No, I produced only 100 units of finished goods, right? So by making use of 1100 kg of raw material, I could have produced 110 units of finished goods. But unfortunately, I produced only 100 units of finished goods. I did not use my raw material effectively. I did not convert my input into output effectively. So this will be an adverse variance because 100 minus 110 is negative 10. So it will be an adverse variance multiplied by standard cost per unit of finished goods. Now listen, let's see how to calculate the standard cost. So here our plan is to use 6 kg of raw material A, and we plan to purchase 6 kg of raw material A for $10. Sorry, 10 rupees, right? So my standard quantity for material A is 6 and material B it is 4 kg, right? What is my standard price for material A? It is rupees, sorry, it is rupees 10 per kg, and the standard price for material B it is 12 per kg. So I have just pulled out these data from here. Okay. Now, how do we calculate the standard cost? Standard cost is nothing but your standard quantity into standard price. So what is my standard quantity? It is 6 into standard price is 10. So standard cost for material A it is 60. And for material B, standard quantity into standard price, 4 into 12, we get 48. So what is my total standard cost? It is 60 plus 48, we get 108. Right. Now, listen, this 108 is the standard cost for how many units of output? For 1 unit of output, the standard cost is 108, right? Here, what do I want? I want the standard cost per unit of finished goods. So for 1 unit of finished goods, my standard cost is 108. So multiply it with 108. So it is 100 minus 110, we get negative 10 into 108. So it is 1080 negative, or I can write it as 1080 adverse. Why it is adverse? Because by making use of 1100 kg of raw material, I could have produced 110 units of finished goods, but actually I produced only 100 units of finished goods. I did not use my input properly, or I did not convert my input properly into output. So it is an adverse variance. And one more important thing to understand here is, listen, here the standard cost is 108 and standard cost per unit of finished goods is also 108. Why? Because here the standard output is 1 unit. So 108 by 1 is 108 itself. Suppose, let's say the standard output is, instead of 1 unit, let's say it is 2 unit. In that case, the whole calculation will change. Here, the standard cost is for 2 units of finished goods. So listen, finished goods and standard cost. So in order to produce 2 units of finished goods, the standard cost is 108, right? So then what will be the standard cost for 1 unit of finished goods? So in that case, it should be 108 by 2. So it will be 54. So here in this question, we directly took 108 here because the standard output in the question was 1. Suppose if the standard output is not 1, then the standard cost should be divided by the standard output to get the standard cost per unit of finished goods. I hope it is clear.